I always begin either before I do the teachings. Oh, wait a minute. How many of you are new to InsightLA today? How many have never been here before? If you've got your camera on, I will see you. If you don't, I'll just welcome you with an extra thank you, Lynn. And from Calgary, okay. So we roughly divide this time into thirds where we're going to do some meditating, and then I offer some teachings, and then we have some conversation with each other. And we begin with either now or before I give the teachings part with a land acknowledgement, just to say that we are acknowledging that we are on the unceded lands of dispossessed Indigenous people who lived here since time immemorial, really, from the Tongva and Chumash tribes, especially around, excuse me, Keys, around the Los Angeles County area. And, these people from these tribes are still taking care of the land where they can, and they have websites you can learn about. These folks, and it's actually very moving to do so. So let's sit together. Find a comfortable frame for your body. We'll practice for about 30 minutes, give or take, and I will, excuse me, I will offer some guided meditation, but we like to sit a lot with the quiet. It's so rare for us to be actually, I was going to say disconnected, but here we are. We are connected on our devices. I'm pretending we're in person because I'm so sad that we didn't continue the in-person meetings. And I will just give you an update since the collapse of InsightLA so dramatically a couple months ago, that a new crew of people have stepped up and volunteered for now to keep it going. And they have it looks like, Jack and I are both really relieved. We've looked at it. They have a 6-month plan, which is very viable. And I think that by restructuring and streamlining and focusing on our original mission, which was to teach people how to meditate and offer some deep teachings, that it's good to go. I'm really happy to tell you. And even though I've retired from my job there, my everything, I'm going to continue with this sitting group through InsightLA just as a gesture of friendship and support. Okay, so let's excuse me, let's sit together, or let's stand, whatever you're doing, lying down. Let's practice together. So we begin by taking 3 deep cleansing breaths, breathing in and out. Very consciously, intentionally deep breaths. And another one, breathing in and relaxing with the out breath. And one more time, taking a deep breath in and releasing any tension there may be in the body as you breathe out. And then allowing the breath to move in its own natural rhythm. And just as you breathe, as you settle into the body, as you settle into this moment, letting go of everything that may have come before this moment and everything that may follow, just being here. Just noticing the quality of your mind, how it is for you right now. Noticing how it is for you with the intention to see and understand, not to judge or be critical or compare this time to last time. And noticing the sounds of life around you. And there's a sound coming from upstairs. I apologize if it bothers you. And having said that, it will probably stop. No, we're not trying to get rid of distractions to meditation, but simply to embrace it all in this big sky of consciousness, our mindful awareness that can hold it all. If your mind is jumpy or restless, just focus just slightly more on the out breath. Especially at the end of the out breath, where it just kind of dissolves into space. And if it's kind of dull or sleepy, bring a little more attention to the in breath, the energizing breath. Just breathing in the aliveness of this moment. And when you notice you're lost in thought, you can gently shift your body back, just maybe an inch, into this posture of receptivity, just receiving the breath, receiving the moment. Breath by breath, moment by moment. And as we sit together, practice meditation together in whatever posture you may be in, noticing the quality of your consciousness right now. It can be encouraging to notice the absence of certain qualities like anger or hatred. Anger is not present right now, if that's the case. Jealousy is not present right now, if that's the case. Just allowing yourself to appreciate some of the hindrances to being present that are not happening right now, as well as the ones that are. And noticing the qualities that may be present, like steadiness, mindfulness, some tenderness or kindness, a bit of joy or gladness. So today I'd like to talk to you about awakening from the early Buddhist perspective and the hindrances to awakening. Because I feel like this is a really good time. We can see all the hindrances, which I'll describe alive and well, rather, in the world around us right now. And in early Buddhism, sometimes we call Theravada Buddhism. Vada is way, and Thera means elders, the way of the elders. Liberation is made very grounded and practical. And I spoke about this in the retreat last week. I don't know if any of you were there, but it's about cleaning out, really as best we can. And cleaning out implies we can get rid of these things once and for all, which is not the case. But really looking at the activity of greed or wanting or anger or hatred or ill will, ignorance, which in this tradition, ignorance means not paying attention to the quality of your mind or heart. It's not about not having knowledge or not accumulating knowledge. It's not being mindful and attentive. And they call it a path of purification. And I like that better than this feeling of like, I think of it more as house cleaning. You just sadly don't clean your house once and for all, right? You clean your house, and I mean, yesterday I vacuumed, and I'm already seeing like little bits. Oh, there's a piece of dust that wasn't there yesterday. We have to do it regularly, and the way that we do this is in meditation here. So we're going to talk some about these hindrances and why are they called hindrances? They're called hindrances because they occlude or block our clarity. They block our access to our own hearts, and they torment us when we're meditating where they can. And I feel like we are here, especially at this time in the world, what we're doing here is making ourselves, as best we can, a zone of peace, which also means not fighting with the things, the hindrances, but we'll talk more about that. How to make yourself a zone of peace, right in the midst of the difficulties of your personal life and the world around us. Because, as I was saying, agitation and fear and anger and hatred, these hindrances to being present are really visible right now. Sloth and torpor, turning away, doubt. How do we get into this? I mean, it's all visible in our culture. But today we're going to talk about how the Buddha talked about these being present in our own hearts, understanding that peace in the world begins with peace in our own hearts. Years ago, I visited a home really for, in Myanmar, in Burma, a home for women who had been struggling with mental illness or who had been abused and had nowhere to go. And it was run by this amazing, very powerful, strong, grounded nun. And the women, they were living there and practicing meditation together. And she had gathered together all these traumatized people, or people with, as I said, their mental problems, and they were meditating together. And as we were leaving, this woman came up to me. I mean, she was an older woman, she's probably my age, and this was 10 years ago. And she started tugging on my sweater, and I was a little concerned. I didn't know what she wanted. And her eyes were kind of blazing. And then she said to me in English, "Peace of mind, peace of mind." She said it 3 times, peace of mind. So how do we get peace of mind and freedom from having the hindrances be in charge of us? We're not going to be free of hindrances in this human life, but we can have a choice about how much they are in charge of us. And we work with these hindrances together as we meditate together and in community when we can actually be in physical presence together. And mindfulness is what keeps it all together, you know, all these things. So this is how the Buddha described them. Now the Buddha was somebody who, when he became enlightened, when he understood his own mind and heart thoroughly and really felt that he had found a way out of suffering, he spent the rest of his life on the road, traveling and teaching and meeting with people from all walks of life. And he used different metaphors or similes according to who was in front of him. And this is these are some of the ways that he talked about the hindrances. The first one, there are classically 5 in Buddhist psychology. And the first one is greed, or wanting what we don't have. And in that category would go addictions, craving, you know, just that intense wanting. I can be meditating and fairly peaceful, and then I might start thinking about lunch and fantasizing about lunch and wanting this or that for lunch. And anyway, that's a very mild example, but those are the ones that usually are hardest to catch. We can catch the very obvious, you know, urges and cravings and things like that. And he described this hindrance to being present, because these are all strategies of disconnection from being present with our experience as it unfolds. And this first one he described, he said, it's as if you're trying to look at your reflection in a bowl of water that's colored with red dye. And so it's not clear, you know. What you see is this red dye of lust, of wanting, of craving, of, you know. And we can see this, of course, in our own hearts, not just when we're meditating either. It's just easier to see when you're meditating. And then the second one is called ill will, and that's all the expressions of anger, of hatred, or mild aversion to experience, not wanting what we do have, not wanting what we do have in any given moment. And he described this bowl, when you look in it and you're trying to see a reflection, this bowl is boiling. It's like a steaming, you know, the steam and the boiling of the water that mars the surface make it also really hard to see clearly. And you can't see your own face in that water. And all of these categories of irritation or annoyance, or, you know, just something that bugs you, they're all part of this one. And again, our clarity, our sense of presence, of really being here, our hearts and minds open, it gets obscured by our resentments and grudges and the ill will that we can carry in our hearts. And it can be huge, or it can be more subtle, but it's all the same in terms of making it hard for us to see. And then there's one that is lethargy or dullness. The classic translation is sloth and torpor, which our friend Wes used to call. He said it sounds like a law firm, sloth and torpor. It's a Victorian translation of this sense of just, can't be bothered, too tired. Just that sense of being sort of dragged down by life, and makes it hard again to stay awake when we're meditating. It makes it hard to just not totally drift away into thinking. And this one, he said, it's like this bowl of water that's covered with algae and slime. You know, that's sort of the lassitude, sometimes we call it laziness, but it just feels more blaming. It's everything that is the opposite of a sharp and interested mind, curious about our surroundings. And when the Buddha talked about spiritual friendship, his cousin, his attendant, Ananda, famously asked him, is spiritual friendship important on this path? And wouldn't you say it's like half the path? And the Buddha answered, no, no, I would say it's the whole path. It's all of the path. And so he went on to say, when he was talking about the qualities of friendship and the kinds of spiritual friend, somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who's not going to tell your secrets, or somebody. And he says, but the main thing is, don't choose friends who are lethargic. And I thought, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that as being like the worst quality, but yeah, that quality of just apathy, really. I think he was really warning not just about dullness or sleepiness, but about becoming apathetic. It's a kind of, because that's really a masked form of despair, I think, apathy, or it can be resignation. Okay, then there's the quality. This is we each have our preferred hindrance. By preferred, I don't mean we like it the best. I mean it's the one that appears the most in our practice. And for me, it's restlessness, and all the manifestations of restlessness, whether it's agitation or anxiety or just wanting to be somewhere else. I guess that would be part of wanting too. But the bowl that represents restlessness is it's like water made turbulent by the wind. It's frothing. It's full of waves and ripples. Again, you can't see clearly when you look into that water. And I think there's too much movement when there's restlessness, and you can notice it sometimes when you meditate. I mean, I actually felt it at the beginning of this sitting, like just want to get up and do stuff, just that sense of hard to sit still, hard to calm down, hard to just quiet into being present with experience, whatever it might be. And then the fifth one is doubt. This is actually the slipperiest one to recognize in our experience, because doubt, it comes to us in thoughts that we tend to believe. Like, oh, I don't think this is the right practice for me, or this isn't the right teacher for me, or maybe this isn't the right community for me, or maybe I'm just not up to it. I'm not a good meditator. This isn't going to be my path. I mean, all these doubts appear as thoughts that we often believe, and they are they're really important. And the water that is in the bowl of doubt is muddy, it's cloudy, it's not turbulent like the restlessness, but it's as if the bowl is sort of placed in the dark where you can't see your face again. And it makes us, doubt just really grabs our attention, and it just makes it hard to see the truth of our innate clarity that we all have. Deep down, the mind is clear and calm and sane and good. I use the word mind just, I guess, out of habit, because it's what my teachers used to always use, but we could easily substitute that word with heart. The word that is in Pali is chitta, which means mind, heart. There's not two separate words for that which generates thoughts and that which generates our emotions, and in our meditation, we can see how they're linked. And so you might be wondering, okay, here's the list of hindrances. I've never really loved giving hindrance talks because I always felt the lists were maybe a little boring, but I think they're really useful because when you're meditating, okay, so in my first insight meditation retreat, my first Vipassana retreat, where I heard these teachings of the 5 hindrances and the 4 noble truths, the Buddhist lists, What was helpful to me in my practice, because I love cookies, but you could choose what you love, was I created 5 cookie jars. And then when I noticed, when I was able to be mindful of a hindrance that had arisen, I would just put it in that cookie jar. And it really helped. It really helped me come back to just being here. So there was a cookie jar for wanting, and there was a cookie jar for, all the forms of ill will, and a cookie jar for all the forms of restlessness, and a cookie jar for lethargy, dullness, a cookie jar for doubt, which for me usually manifested more as self-doubt than doubting other people. And why is it important to notice these things? Again, because they are ways that we disconnect from the aliveness of our present experience. And when we look out at the world and the horror of what's going on, for example, in the Middle East, there are horrifying things going on in Sudan, in Myanmar, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I could just go down a whole list. Central African Republic. There are horrifying things going around in so many places around the world, but right now, what has just flared up is a centuries old conflict. It hits in Israel and Palestine, and you can just go down the list of hindrances, and here they are, just made vivid in the world around us. And so it's important. How do we make ourselves a zone of peace? As I said earlier, how do we make ourselves, I don't mean force ourselves. How do we allow ourselves or come to embody peacefulness? And part of how you come to embody peacefulness is by noticing that which is not of peace in your heart. The metaphor the Buddha used for this process was refining gold. And I like it because the gold is our innate wisdom, our innate compassion, the Pabhasara Chitta, it's called, the radiant, luminous mind. And you might not feel like your mind is filled with radiant, luminous light, but think of it as just clarity. It's just clear. And so he talked about a goldsmith preparing a furnace where all these gross defilements in the gold ore can be purified, clearing off at first all the coarse grit and sand, and then cooking it and blowing on it, sprinkling water on it, all skimming off the impurities. Our mind is like gold, and even though we may be miserable, even though we may be frightened, even though we may be giddy with some personal joy that we don't even want to look at the news of the world, a very revered Tibetan Lama once said, Tupu Urchin said, the price of gold goes up and down, but it doesn't matter. What do you think he meant by that? What do you think he meant by that? I think he meant our mind is still gold. Whether we're valuing it or devaluing it, whether it's filled with hindrances, or whether it's clear and bright, it doesn't, from the perspective of awareness itself, and especially infusing that awareness with some tenderness or love, it doesn't matter. It's still gold. I want to read you a poem. I've read this before, but not for a very long time. It's called Mimesis by a poet named Fadi Joda. And it goes like this. My daughter wouldn't hurt a spider that had nested between her bicycle handles for 2 weeks. She waited until it left of its own accord. If you tear down the web, I said, It'll simply know this isn't a place to call home, and then you'd get to go biking. She said, that's how others, oh, excuse me. Why am I apologizing for having an emotion? I'm not. If you tear down the web, I said, it'll simply know this isn't a place to call home, and you'd get to go biking. And she said, that's how others become refugees, isn't it? And there's a quote that I want to share with you from somebody who I feel is writing like good things right now about this war. I know I have it. Hold on. Here it is. And this is Yuval Harari is an Israeli, like a sort of public intellectual and author. And this is talking about being overwhelmed by trauma. Most Israelis are psychologically incapable at this moment of empathizing with the Palestinians. The mind is filled to the brim with our own pain, and no space is left to even acknowledge the pain of others. Most Palestinians are psychologically incapable of this moment of empathizing with Israelis. You know, and just 17,000 Israelis is like what, 170, if somebody had come and assassinated 170,000 Americans. Their minds are filled with the brim with their own pain. No space is left. Their minds are so filled with pain, they cannot see our pain. But outsiders who are not themselves immersed in pain should make an effort to empathize with all suffering humans, rather than lazily seeing only one side of this terrible reality. And this is the part for us. It is the job of outsiders to help maintain a space for peace, because that's what we're doing here, whether intentionally or not. We here in Israel and Palestine deposit this peaceful space with you, that's with us, because we cannot hold it right now. Take good care of it for us. You take good care of it for us, so that one day, when the pain begins to heal, you and Israelis and Palestinians might inhabit that space together. So each one of our gatherings, when we meet like this to listen to teachings and practice the teachings together, each of our retreats, I just taught a retreat with a wonderful InsightLA teacher, Gulu Singh, and his wife, Gabrielle Hammond, taught us Qigong, the movement, during the I guess it was 5 nights of meditation retreat. It was a short retreat, but each one of us, when we come to practice like this, and we practice on our own too, it's just a little harder, can be a container and a crucible. Retreats are more like a crucible for learning how to hold our minds and hearts very carefully, so that when we get lost, as we inevitably do, we can hold some space of inner peace. Just check and see what else I wanted to share with you before closing this talk. And yes, I can put the poem in the chat in a minute. I just want to add that mindfulness itself, and mindfulness, mindful awareness includes that tenderness of non-judging, of non-comparing, of non-criticizing, but of, if not embracing, at least accepting what this moment brings. And, you know, the beauty of this practice, the amazing miracle of this practice is that when we do it on our own, when we do it together, it really does give us the confidence that whatever life brings is workable. So I think I'll stop for there. I'll stop there for today. And yeah, invite you to share what's coming up in your practice these days. It doesn't obviously need to be anything that I've talked about, but it can be. And I also want to welcome my old friend, Mag Diamond, who I have not seen for way, way, way too long, since the pandemic. My new friend, Gus Bray, who I met, who was working in the kitchen when I met him at the retreat center. Our retreat was at Mary and Joseph Retreat Center in Palos Verdes, and I was late for lunch one day and I was panicking because the food was gone. And you're not supposed to bother the people in the kitchen at all. Of course, that's got to be a rule, cardinal rule, right? Because, you know, you can imagine if everyone was knock, 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 can I have another lettuce leaf? I want more lettuce. Well, it would probably be chocolate chip cookies, but I broke the rule, and Gus brought me some lunch and helped all of us have lots of delicious, amazing food. So thank you, Gus.